Thank you for coming out today. This is our second full steering committee meeting. And I just want to, by way of refresher, the purpose of this particular group. This is our main committee meeting. If you've been following the recovery process, we've broken out the recovery process into different subcommittees. And this is the committee where we have report backs from the different various subcommittees on what's happening within their groups, their interactions with the community. If there are policy decisions that need to be made, this is the group that makes those particular policy decisions. The one thing that's going to be unique about this particular meeting is we are going to have a presentation with regard to some of the land development codes that the board has recently adopted as far as suspending some particular rules. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we provided this information before the holiday, because we know that people are actually out there working and doing some things, so we want to provide you as much guidance as possible. But again, these committee meetings are open to the public. We are trying to schedule our subcommittee meetings at various times, primarily in the evening, so people can participate in those. But if you happen to miss those meetings, feel free to attend this meeting, and you can get caught up on some of the areas of concerns and issues that were raised at that subcommittee level. So I want to start off first with a welcome and introduction, allow people to go around the table and just briefly state who they are, and then we'll roll into the agenda. Again, I am County Commissioner Darrell Glenn, District 1. And I will pass it. Oh, you actually have a mic, so you want to go ahead?
State Senator Kent Lambert, Senate District 9.
Sean Perkins on the Debris Removal Subcommittee.
State Representative Dan Nordberg, House District 14.
Donna Arkowski, the Black Forest Committee.
Ed Bracken.
Ed Bracken at Black Forest Community as well.
I'm Carolyn Brown. I'm with the Slash Mulch Black Forest Community Club, and I guess this Black Forest Fire thing.
Judy Von Ollenfeld, and I'm also with the Black Forest Group, which is actually Black Forest Together. I think that's the name for it.
I'm Amy Lathan. I am co-chair of this group and then the chair of the subcommittee on debris removal and cleanup recovery. Thanks for being here, folks.
Okay, our first subcommittee report, we're going to have Commissioner Amy Lathan talk about her cleanup and recovery process subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. We are, I know that some of the subcommittees are still being populated. I have confirmed 10 folks so far, and I am going to try to increase that just a little bit more. This is going to be a very, very busy group, and so I am continuing to populate this subcommittee. I wanted to be able to meet with them on Friday, but obviously with the holiday, we're just missing a number of folks, and we don't want to try to push so hard that we miss half of our group and we're just not able to get anything done. So we are looking at Monday. We will have our first subcommittee meeting. Time that we've tentatively set right now is 3:30 in the afternoon. We are trying to locate the right location. Thank you, Eddie. We were talking about the community center in Black Forest. It's not available that afternoon, so we'll either change the time to be able to be out in the community center, or perhaps we'll meet out at the at our county facility on Acres Drive, our public services facility out there, which isn't too far. So we'll continue to work on that. Our group is obviously, it's cleanup, recovery, debris removal. So we're working on a lot of those emergent issues that many folks are dealing with right now. We learned a lot from our meeting on Friday evening. We have a lot of questions that came up that we're responding to and that really helped give us more direction. So at this first meeting, we will be talking about a number of issues, including slash mulch, and some issues that have come up there and some questions, and perhaps some changes that we should consider there. Obviously, any kind of the land mitigation, tree planting, that's come up a lot from folks. We continue to be advised that we should not be planting anything right now. It's too late in the season. And so we still want to be developing a plan and making sure that we're getting the correct information there. There have been a number of folks who have contacted us with different ideas. Our subcommittee is going to go through and vet those ideas And I'm hoping to task some of the folks on the subcommittee with some of these ideas. Go out, take a look at what they look like, bring them back to the group for a possible recommendation. We are going to be looking at dumpsters. Dumpsters came up in the meeting and have been an issue that folks want to talk about. Are we going to get more dumpsters out there? Who does that? Is that the county? Are we going to be relying on the private sector? How do we work all that out? Those are the kinds of issues that we're going to be working on, putting all of that agenda together. So on Monday, we'll begin to talk about those things. And what I hope to do is have a meeting on Monday and then again at the end of the week, very rapidly, to be able to begin some very rapid response on these things. And so as we do that, again, as we've stated, those meetings, all the subcommittee meetings will be public. Open. We love the input. It helps us learn at the same time. So we're going to go through these and anything else that comes up, and we'll report that back to this main group. I'll probably be looking at some folks from health to come and help us with some of that. Kathy, I've got you on a list. So we'll be looking at a number of issues, and I think that's where our committee stands at the moment.
Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
If I might just make a comment for Commissioner Lathan about the dumpsters. I talked to Carol Walker at the Rocky Mountain Insurance Information Association a little bit about that because we'd had several questions come up. But one of the important things, and it really wasn't emphasized during the Monday night meeting, but a lot of the responsibility for paying for the dumpsters actually comes out of insurance if you have the insurance coverage. But it's important to charge it to the right section of your insurance. If it's under the debris removal section, that's probably good. If it's under your general policy section, you're drawing down that coverage. So you got to look at your own individual policies, like the like the folks from the state insurance division mentioned on Monday night. Make sure it's charged to the wrong line, or you may have some problems later on with how your insurance payouts work.
Thank you very much. You know, and one issue that comes up at various times during our subcommittees when we have public comment, there's always references to, I use this particular insurance company, I use this vendor or whatever. I just want to make sure that we're very clear. The county is not endorsing any of those particular efforts. We are not entering into the marketplace. We're not picking winners and losers. We're just want to make sure that we provide a way for you to be able to do your own due diligence and research. But when you hear statements or if you see publications from the county is not issuing any endorsements with that. So we want to be very responsible and allow the market to take care of itself. Any other questions with regard to cleanup and recovery up here? If not, then we will move on to community support. I don't know if Commissioner Clark has a representative here. If not, public health, do we want to give a quick public health update? Do you have something that you want to share with us briefly? Not to put you on the spot, but. You might as well just sit here.
Related to the community support? Yeah. Okay, sure. I'm getting used to impromptu. So on the community support side, and actually I don't have my laptop right in front of me, as far as the Disaster Assistance Center, as you know, we originally had opened the first location at the end of the first week of the fire, and then we maintained that location and opened a second location up at TCA. Travers, do you remember the final number that got posted on last night's data as to how many we've served individuals? Thank you so much. Last my memory checks, we have provided over 600 tetanus boosters through public health. We have also done probably close to 500 water tests. And through the Assistance Center at the Garden of the Gods location, total we have served 1,799. And at the new location up north, 145, so just about 2,000 visits since we provided that service. That service, because the numbers are down now in terms of a need to actually go in person, the DAC will be closing this afternoon at 6 p.m. tonight, but it is my understanding that the call center will remain open until we otherwise determine when that may not be necessary to help people get things coordinated on a telephone basis and just assess what some of the needs are.
Thank you very much. Any questions with regard to public health before we move on to the next topic?
I have a question on, thanks. Judy Von Allefeld. I have a question on the DAC. Regional Building was up there too. Are they still there?
In terms of this afternoon? Well, let me tell you what we are actually working on, but we need to actually coordinate and see if we can find some space. Our ultimate hope, and I can't speak for regional building, but I can speak for public health, is we would like to be able to have either a mobile trailer or some office space or something with connectivity, because we need to be able to have technology to do some of our work for you related to septics and wells. So we're trying to find out where we might be able to have an environmental health specialist located to be right there within the community. But again, that dialogue just started this week in terms of how might that look. No, I'm sorry, ma'am, the entire DAC. Including the regional, yes. Some departments have already self-removed, but again, we know there's still a need there, and so we're having that next dialogue.
And that's part of our agenda. We're going to go through and talk about that. So there, later on in our meeting, we will have a full presentation on the Disaster Assistance Center. All right, our next subcommittee is Citizen Preparedness Lessons Learned. Commissioner Littleton is out of town, but I will kind of hit the highlights from our first meeting that we had on Monday. And this was a very good meeting. We're going to have multiple sessions with regard to providing insurance information. We had some Waldo Canyon survivors at this particular meeting that shared some of the lessons learned that they experienced. And there are a couple of key takeaways from this meeting, and really stress the importance of being organized throughout this entire process. Some of these things sound, it's almost like common sense, but when you're going through this particular issue, you need to remind yourself that, sometimes you need to take a walk around the block and have a cool head when you're dealing with your insurance company, if you have an insurance company, and make sure you get everything in writing and be careful about what you say. You don't want to speak from a position of being frustrated, because they will tend to document those particular things, and then you'll get a letter in the mail stating something that you might not even remember, but you might have said in frustration. Try to do your best to be in the proper frame of mind when you're dealing with your insurance company. Spend a lot of time understanding your policy. You really want to understand what you are entitled to, because again, one of the key points that came up during the meeting was this is your money. You need to treat this like a business transaction. You're trying to access your money that you've been paying into. So you want to make sure that they understand that you realize it's your money and you want to get everything that you're entitled to under your particular policy. So be organized, be prepared to inventory your assets. Some of the insurance companies will try to make you do that. So in your mind, do the best you can. If you took pictures, great. If not, try to think back through by room to figure out what was there. Remember, the importance of replacement costs is very important when you start talking about trying to recoup, some of your well-beings. And again, get a certified copy of your insurance policy. Do the best thing you can, because you want to make sure that you're operating from the same guidelines that they are operating under. So there are going to be several workshops that we're going to have throughout the year. I think there's going to be one on Monday, July 8th. We're going to send out a press release on that, but the United Policyholders is going to do a workshop, try to help people, give them some information. Again, we're not advocating anybody, but that's some good opportunity to ask some questions, good opportunity to try to interact with some of the other Waldo Canyon survivors and learn from them firsthand what they went through. Any questions with regard to this particular subcommittee before we move on to the next one? We're going to have a public comment session thing. Okay, legislative support. I'll turn it over to Senator Kent Lambert.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. And I'd like to recognize that State Representative Pete Lee is here. Right here. And we're going to try to keep him involved with all the issues that are coming through the Legislative Support Committee. And one of the, I think, changes that happened since last week is with the flooding over in Manitou Springs, there's some, I guess, legal ties to what we would do with fire mitigation, because the fire actually is causing the floods. So I just wanted to let the committee know we're not going to stop the scope of this strictly at Black Forest because it affects the whole of El Paso County. So if issues come up like that are connected to like FEMA payments and so forth, we'll try to discuss those in the same context as the Black Forest fire. I sent an email out to all members of the commission and to everybody on the Legislative Support Subcommittee very, very early this morning. So you may not all have seen that, but I will just summarize some of the things that are going on right now. We will try to come back, use that as an agenda from meeting to meeting as we go forward. We have not had a formal meeting yet because we're kind of waiting to see what happens with FEMA and excuse the if there's some inaccuracies because the state moves very fast on this and the county to get the requests together, and then you wait for a while to see what FEMA says about it. So we're not going to have all the answers until FEMA makes a decision as to what they're going to cover. But to summarize, I think there's already been a request for the public assistance side of declaration that has been sent to FEMA. But I think this, from what I've heard, the state is still considering a limited aspect of individual assistance that might relate to unemployment insurance or to counseling, things like that, that could be an impact upon the state. Generally, the individual assistance does not meet the criteria in this case. We did look at an analysis that was done here with the local insurance companies, and they identified a fairly large number of homes, a good high percentage of homes that did have insurance. So that sort of takes away the momentum that the FEMA would be paying for a lot of the individual assistance to individual homeowners. However, other federal assistance may be available in the long run. Small Business Administration apparently has some money available. They're helping out through various businesses in the area, and we just don't know until we know what the FEMA payments are, what Congress and the U.S. Senate might do in terms of additional monies by new appropriations coming into the area. That'll be, I think, a topic of conversation for all of our members on the Legislative Support Committee. First of all, what can the federal government do? And then what can the state government do if there are other incremental things that we can do after that? But those are all fairly long-term questions. I did find out that, well, we had passed a Senate bill this year, Senate Bill 82, which established a joint wildfire matters review committee. That will be a legislative committee of 10 legislators, probably will not meet for the first time until this fall. However, they have identified a legislative staff member as the coordinator of that future committee, and we will be passing all of our information off to him as well, Mr. Bo Pogue, and a very competent staffer up at the legislature. So when we do have issues that come up at the state level, if they require legislation, it may very well be that they would be assigned to that standing joint committee for action rather than other committees. And they may be able to even take some action prior to the start of the legislature next January, if it doesn't involve money. Effectiveness of mitigation, we had heard that the governor was commissioning some sort of study to, or a team to look at what happened with mitigation. Was it effective? Was it not effective? That type of thing. We've been able to confirm that there is a discussion about that. As a matter of fact, I think their first meeting is taking place now up in Denver. And we'll try to get more information about that, but I think they're seeing Black Forest as an important case study about the effects of spacing of trees and so forth. So I'm sure Judy, there's probably a lot of people down here interested in taking part in those discussions if they go forward. And I understand this is going to be a contracted study, so they're going to be discussing putting out bids for who that contractor might be. To do the study. So, which is not unusual for state government to do that. One issue was raised Monday night about disposal of unidentified vehicles. In other words, vehicles that were totally destroyed in the fire. The constituent I heard from mentioned that there could be up to 1,000 vehicles that were so totally destroyed that they don't have VIN numbers. So I have asked the Department of Revenue to research that. If vehicle is totally destroyed, does not have a VIN number, how do you dispose of the registration and the title and identify somehow that with a car that was really destroyed? And since it's an emergency, is there a procedure around, normal legal procedures that would require that VIN number? If we don't do that, disposal or companies may not take those vehicles away out of Black Forest because they have nothing to do with it. They can't dispose of the vehicle unless they know who it's titled to. So we've already contacted Department of Revenue, and they are going to run through their divisions to find out what might have to take place to provide some relief in that area. We did have some discussions actually with Jill Law about public health as it pertains to gray water over at First Baptist Church of Black Forest. And we did talk to CDPHE, the Public Health Environment at the state level. I guess that's still being communicated or whatever, but we've closed the loop. It's a matter of, I guess there was some concern about whether this is sewage or whatever. So that's taking place, and maybe after the meeting I can introduce you to the folks out there that work that issue. El Paso requirements, I met yesterday afternoon over in Manitou Springs with Commissioner Clark, and she raised a requirement for, well, to summarize it, one additional person funding, state funding for an additional state recovery manager, as well as a public affairs type of person. So really 2 individuals and funding for 2 individuals, either for the county or from the state, to do those functions. Because we have to estimate that there's going to be a lot more destruction from flooding, a lot of emergency coordination, the public affairs type of person would probably be responsible for public education, as well as notifying the public if there is an emergency. We have asked that question of Ian Hyde from the State Emergency Management Office, so he can start working that through the executive branch. I think they would have to initiate that type of question, but if we get that on the table, see where, what the options are for funding positions like that, we'll just keep following that into the future. Just briefly, there are 3 issues just for future reference, lessons learned coming out of the fire. One is in the area of command and control. When we do have an emergency, there's a whole hierarchy of local governments and state governments, federal governments, different federal organizations that declare disaster emergencies. We've looked at that in the past, and one of the questions is, should that be streamlined? Do we need better communications to, if there is an emergency, to contact different echelons of government to bring them to bear more quickly? We don't know if there's a particular problem, but that's an important thing that we need to discuss as a result of any major fire like this, to see if that can be streamlined so we can get the state involved, especially of moving in, for instance, other fire departments come to the scene faster. Can we provide aviation assets faster? Things like that. We've all aware of those kinds of problems, but I think we need a methodical discussion of that in the future through the state legislature. Also, that sort of spills over into aviation assets. Been a lot of good ideas about that, but the fact is the federal government has, like the MAF aircraft, the C-130s, I think have drawn down to from about 40 to 8 today. 4 of which have been moved down to Arizona temporarily to fight the Arizona fires. but it is not sufficient probably to do national coverage, even in Colorado with the number of fires that we have out west. We're very concerned about new fires starting, especially on the western slope because of the weather conditions out there. So this should be perceived as a long-term issue of how do we develop the right force mix, the capacity, the tactics, the type of aircraft that should be bought in the future. But this could be a revolutionary change if we have the right discussion on this. And it's also a question of what's the right roles and missions for the federal government vis-a-vis the state government. I did find out yesterday that on July 1st, Governor Hickenlooper had suggested that Colorado might pursue the idea of an interstate compact through the Western Governors Association to purchase or share firefighting aircraft. So I think this will be an important interstate type of discussion that could happen through the National Guard. It could happen through, just state to state through our departments of public safety, but it's an important issue for the future. Also, since last year, there has been a major analysis of some of the hydrology of the Waldo Canyon floodplains. There are several different drainages over there. They've put together some really important analyses that are operational, and a lot of operational decisions for the county are going to be based upon those analyses. We would like to revisit that to see if there are lessons learned for how those emergency analyses are being implemented, because some of the same types of things could be applied to actual firefighting. I think I think Matrix is the name of the company that's been hired to do that, and they don't have a publicly released model or anything like that, but they are getting very close to doing that. So we want to continue those kinds of discussions and apply them to these problems. We've also heard that Senator Udall, during the debates about the Farm Bill, had introduced a concept of a new hazard mitigation grant program. And apparently that would have triggered up to about 15% additional funding outside of the normal amount that FEMA is provided through the Fire Management Assistance Grant Program, both of which would be triggered by presidential declarations. That amendment was put onto the Farm Bill, which did not pass. But I think as part of our future deliberations, our representatives from Congressman Lamborn's office, Senator Udall's office, and Senator Bennett's office need to look at that potential again to see if the current plan for FEMA could be redirected a little bit so some of that money could go to recovery and mitigation of future problems rather than just immediate emergency problems. So it is a good concept that we need to discuss, but right now it's been stalled in Congress, and maybe we can help get that off dead center into the future. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. Yeah, General?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Respect to command and control. On this particular fire, it escalated very quickly from the local district to the county and then to the state and then to the feds. Probably within 24 hours it happened. That's unusual, the rapidity, less than 24 hours of that happening. And one of the key things of getting airborne support is the fact that once it has to go to the Fed level before that happens. And then once it goes to the Fed level, that all commercial tankers or dispensing aircraft have to be tasked out and maximized before the government, the federal government. So that's federal law, and that's going to have to change if you go down the path that you're suggesting on that thing. So it's not entirely within the state's prerogatives to handle this kind of situation. The feds have to plays a big role in terms of the allocation of tanker resources.
Well, thank you. And some of that may be changing. Like I said, there may be a different model for interstate cooperation through an interstate compact. We're using a model, or looking at a model of CAL FIRES in Colorado. The organization is called CAL FIRES, where the state of state of California actually has their own fleet of air tankers. Senator King this year sponsored a bill that actually, and it's a Senate bill, if you're interested, Senate Bill 245, actually established the authorization for a Colorado Air Corps, firefighting Air Corps. And unfortunately, that was not funded this year. But they do have an authorization, and we certainly can have this would be under the Department of Public Safety, but we should be studying that and looking at perhaps state solutions for immediate action in fires as well. So there are other models we can look at, especially with the reduction in the MAF fleet, C-130 fleet. We'll have to see what those alternatives are. But of course, it's dependent upon funding. And the bill we were looking at was about $15 million, which is not totally unaffordable.
Hello? There we go. I think that this fire could have had a very different outcome, and I think most other people think so too, had there been even one slurry bomber in the first hour and a half. At the Pine Glen fire, it's about 3 hours, and they had 2 slurry bombers here. I don't know how that happened, but it did, and that helped. But I think the goal for the model needs to be something comparable to the goal for our emergency medical responders, that you have somebody right there 24/7, maybe not necessarily year-round for this, but within, let's say, an hour from any fire that might occur on the Front Range, Denver, Fort Collins, Pueblo, whatever, so that you could have at least one tanker there really fast, you know, and then some others to support it within 2 to 3 hours, and plus the helicopter stuff. I think anything less is not going to do the job, and we can fiddle while Rome burns forever on arguing about this and that, but I think that's what the goal needs to be.
Thank you. On a different part of what Senator Lambert had addressed here, I want to just touch on something that came up yesterday. There was an article in the Gazette, front page, county hoping for funding for uninsured folks, individual grants to uninsured folks. I want to let everybody know that as of today, we still have no idea where that story came from. That has nothing to do with anything that we, as the county, had ever gone out and pursued. So we are waiting for response from the Gazette as to where they sourced that. But obviously there's a policy element to that in terms of the county going out and actively seeking federal money for individuals who are uninsured. That's a major issue for us to deal with, and there's no one that I've been able to find who, from the county level, who has been actively pursuing that. We are working on the clarification. Now, FEMA does go through, and as I had said last week, they went through last week. They're working on their assessment. We don't have the information from them as of what they've come up with at this point. But the article directly stated that El Paso County officials were pursuing this, that El Paso County officials were specifically looking for those individual grants for uninsured, and that's just simply not the case. So we're going to work on getting some clarification out there. Obviously, we'll be working with state level folks and FEMA so that we do know what they're going to come in with. But that is a policy issue that this board has not taken up, and I can speak for myself that would be a very difficult thing for me to support, and that's just not something that we've done. So we're working on clarification on that article, kind of frustrated for us as to why the Gazette would print it in the way that they did. Can't find a source yet.
And just for clarification, I had not heard of anything about that at the state level. What I did hear was that they may be looking for grants to the state to offset the increased cost of unemployment insurance. So, which eventually sort of has an individual benefit, but it would not be a grant to an individual directly.
Right, and that's not what they printed, so we're working on it.
Yeah, and just to finalize that particular point, this here is a policy body. However, if there are issues with regard to the county's particular policy on a particular subject, that is a discussion that will be elevated to the Board of County Commissioners. We will have a public hearing and discussion on that particular issue. If necessary, we will take a vote on that, and then that recommendation will be referred back to this particular body, just so the public is aware of how a decision like that would be made. I think we're now ready for our land development code update, and Commissioner Heise is the chair of that committee, so I will turn it over to him and his support staff.
So where do you want me?
Be wherever you want.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and stand. I'm Dennis Heise, County Commissioner in Wendell. I'm on the south end of the county. I live in Fountain, and when Darrell said, do you want to head up a subcommittee? And I said, oh, probably not, unless there's one that just screams my name. And he said, well, there kind of is. Land use and permits and that kind of stuff, and actually permitting, Amy and I are working that kind of together, but you can't talk about land use without permits. I had previously been on the Planning Commission, and I am also the county representative to regional building. So I kind of fit all those roles. And most of you probably are not real familiar with our land development code or regional building for that matter. It'll be the types of things that you get into as you start the cleanup, the recovery, the rebuilding, all of the above. So with that, let me introduce Mark Gephardt, who's going to give you an overview of some of what the commissioners did yesterday. We had a work session previously, but yesterday we voted and made we relaxed part of our land development code for just the Black Forest area for those folks affected. It's not a county-wide, but so we don't have to go over plowed ground. Let's start with Mark with our land development services division. They were planning commission when I was a planning commissioner, so I still think of them as that, but they're development services. And Mark can tell you what we did, and then we can perhaps go into some questions. The committee, this is our committee meeting, so welcome to the committee. For those of you that would like to be a little more involved, I would like to get your name and contact number so we can kind of get our heads together and see what's going to work best for making progress here. But we'll handle that a little later. Mark?
Mark Gebhardt, El Paso County Development Services Department. I was here at the Friday meeting. The Board of Commissioners last Tuesday had a work session where we brought forward what we thought were some provisions of the development regulations, the zoning regulations, that will be impediments to rebuilding. And there's a lot of history that goes on with this discussion in the Black Forest in general, and we'll call up a PowerPoint here in a second. Yesterday, the Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution suspending portions of the code relative to rebuilding only for those damaged and destroyed properties, not countywide, and there were some very specific provisions that we'll go into a little more detail. I can't say that it covers all the issues that will be brought up, but we were trying to capture the most pressing portions that we felt were an immediate need for recovery. So if we could go to the PowerPoint on, and it won't be that one, there we go. Next slide. Information is in a lot of pages, and we recognize everybody doesn't have internet access, but that's sometimes the best we can do is to get information out. And I made 50 copies of handouts of this, not knowing how many people or the committee. I don't care whether those are handed out. They're being posted on our department webpage. They're just not all up there yet because some of this occurred yesterday and revisions made to the PowerPoint last night. Next slide. Some background's really important for Black Forest that many people don't realize or recognize. Subdivisions in Black Forest were originally, some of them, Brentwood is country club and cabin sites. It was summer homes for people from Colorado Springs that have been converted to permanent residence. So that poses a lot of challenges. Brentwood was, I think, platted in 1928 before there were any county rules and regulations on lot size or how far apart wells and septics were, because they weren't septics at that time and they were hand-dug wells. From a zoning perspective, portions of Black Forest were zoned at two different time periods in 55 and 65, but there weren't any requirements for building permits until at least zoning came in place, and then the county entered an agreement with regional building. So what we know occurs is there are many houses there that weren't required to get a building permit, may have not been required to get a septic permit, and there's no way that we know any information about those unless they've come back in for something additional that we kept records or researched. But the problem becomes, because the area was developed so long ago, many of the parcels don't meet the current zoning standard of 5 acres. That's called a non-conforming circumstance, and there's specific development regulations to address that within our land development code, and some of those are part of the problem, some of the changes the board made yesterday. There's at least 5 different zone districts and different sets of rules, although in at least the majority of the Black Forest, the rules are all the same. Much of Black Forest is not subdivided lots that were platted with a recorded plat. Much of the area exists in meets and bounds legal descriptions or are very old plats where there is not very good surveying or monument records, which makes it hard to find property lines. So when we look at property, we look at our best available information, which is air photos the county has. We know there were a lot of businesses, small home businesses in houses, and that's perfectly allowed and fine and not subject to a permit requirement from the county. So we don't have records of it. We just know they exist. And so that'll pose a future challenge at rebuilding some of those same types of businesses that occurred. In recognition that the rules that are there may work okay outside of a disaster, when you have a disaster, a whole new set of challenges occur. Suddenly 500 people need to rebuild instead of just 1 or 2 a year, something like that, or 10 a year. So the board, in recognition of that, passed a resolution that suspended portions of the Land Development Code regarding rebuilding. Next slide. These are some of the specific actions the Board of Commissioners did, and I'll explain them. They appear in a resolution that's on our website. It's not recorded yet, but it's certainly publicly available and is in the backup package. There's been a regulation in place for a long time that says you can't have an outbuilding until you have the principal building, outbuilding being accessory or secondary. When your house and your garage were both destroyed and you're going to rebuild your house yourself, you're going to need to have a place for your tools and your base of operation for rebuilding. So the Board of Commissioners suspended that requirement for the damaged properties. This is not countywide. For the damaged properties to say an accessory building can be built first, and you don't have to bring in your house plans now, because we know that architects are going to be busy, people need to redesign their houses, et cetera. But we can go ahead and issue that permit for the accessory building first. It can also be constructed concurrently, and I'll get into something about how we've tried to make the permit process on development services side simpler. The regulations have a limit on the size of accessory structures. That's more of a new standard that came after most of the accessory structures have been built in Black Forest. It would pose a problem, because if you don't have a house, how can you have an accessory structure that's not bigger than the house? So the Board of Commissioners suspended that to allow accessory structures to be not have that size limitation. You not only don't have to build the house first, you don't have a size limitation. A number of people had multiple accessory structures on their property. If they consolidate them into a single one, that's fine. They still have to meet whatever building code requirements that exist. Most of Black Forest allows mobile homes. Those are mobile homes, we call them post-76 mobile homes, because that matches also into the building code. Those were built to a certain specified standard by various federal acts, and someone who had a house in an RR5 zoning can replace it with a mobile home. We have a provision also that allows you to put a mobile home while you're building your house. We know that some people aren't ready to build their house yet, so they may need to put a mobile home there for a time period while they prepare the plans for the house. Also, we had a provision that said you can live in an RV while you're building a house if your house plans have been approved and you're under construction. Well, we know that many RVs have moved into Black Forest, and based on necessity for people why they make their plan to rebuild their property. So the Board of Commissioners said, you don't have to have those house plans there. We know the RVs are there. We created a little form that just says, living in an RV until I decide what to do with the house, with a one-year time period for us to check. And it's a no-fee type of permit/form. Non-conforming uses, that's the use of the land, not the fact that there's a building too close to the property. That's something that's not allowed by zoning. We haven't heard of too many of those, but we think there are. And typical regulations say if you don't use it for a year, it goes away. The Board of Commissioners effectively extended that time period for an extra year. Non-conforming structures, that's much of Black Forest has 25-foot setbacks from property lines. If you're in Brentwood, you know that's very hard to meet that setback. Many of the buildings were there before there were any rules. The regulations previously said if that was damaged more than 50%, it couldn't be rebuilt unless it conformed to the current 25-foot setback. The Board of Commissioners effectively suspended that, saying you can rebuild if you're damaged or destroyed, whatever percent it is, in the exact same location. But if that non-conforming structure needs to be rebuilt in a different size, location, etc., it can be, it must meet the setbacks to the greatest extent possible. I can't give you a definition of greatest extent possible other than discretion will be used in allowing it. If it's less than the setback, we'll document what our decision was. And presumably, if you can say, I need to do it, I had a discussion with a person today that said, I had a variance to be 21 feet. I need to combine the house and the outbuilding together into one spot. Can I use that 21 feet that was previously granted? Because I can't go on the other side because that's exactly where my septic system is. Another circumstance might be I can't meet the standard because there's a drainage way. And we certainly know there's plenty of ravines, et cetera, and especially in Brentwood and other locations of the Black Forest. So in essence, the Board of Commissioners gave the Director of the Development Services Department a certain amount of discretion to make a judgment call for non-conforming structures that need to be rebuilt. Two zone districts in Black Forest don't allow mobile homes at all. The Board of Commissioners made a temporary suspension to allow temporary mobile homes in those zone districts for a time period while the house is planning to be reconstructed. There is a limit in those two zone districts. They didn't just say countywide you can have mobile homes in those zone districts. They said in those two specific districts, you can have mobile homes where you couldn't have them before for the purposes of rebuilding your house. And the code provisions that they took action on yesterday are a suspension for 1 year. That doesn't mean they can't come back a year from now and extend that, et cetera. But the effort is to try to accomplish or to at least get a 1 year period for people. We know that decisions are being made that shouldn't be made in haste, and therefore that allows people to step back a little bit. Next slide. Also, there's many questions we've gotten relative to application fees, and I'll go over a slide with one of those in a second, and especially with enforcement. Enforcement, the county has a rubbish ordinance, and we have regulations about businesses and homes that are fairly minor regulations. Boarding of horses and animals requires some approvals generally. We know that's going to happen because people had to relocate, people had to take their animals to a friend, et cetera. The Board of Commissioners, and I don't mean to speak for them, but they essentially have said, we don't want to push those issues unless they really need to be pushed. They didn't really say, don't enforce for a year. They said, you have to use discretion in determining whether enforcement is to occur. I had a person say, I'm not rebuilding unless you make my neighbor cut down his trees. And I know there's going to be discussion or has been discussion about trees. The reverse of that is, are you going to make me cut down my trees? There's not a single answer that gets to those direction, and so that's why some discretion is required. And we'll have to utilize that, and I believe the board has empowered the director to utilize that discretion. If you think somebody's going to be enforcing on you, I want to make sure you know that all enforcement decisions come from the Board of County Commissioners. Staff does a presentation to them, and they make that decision. And so the board, to my knowledge, is not interested in going out and making life hard for people that need to rebuild. Same would apply with, for example, boarding of horses and animals. If the zoning requires some form of zoning approval, but this is a temporary circumstance, we're not interested in disrupting that if it's not causing neighbors any problems. Next slide. Regarding permits, what our department has come up with is, in essence, what, for lack of a better term, call a bundled permit. Since many of the houses exist before records were required, we may not know where your driveway is. We may not know where your house exactly was other than looking at an air photo. To rebuild, you normally need from Development Services a site plan. And site plan is required for a house, is required for an outbuilding, et cetera. So we're trying to bundle the permits under a single site plan and only charge one fee. We don't have driveway permits for most houses. That was something that only came into place after 2000. And so we're going to ask people to fill out a driveway permit, but we're not going to charge them for it. And that'll be a part of what we do when people rebuild, is go back up and look at that driveway to ensure or see if it meets county requirements for safety, or culverts or things like that that may be important to meet current standards on. So these are various permits that we think potentially can fall under a single site plan permit. Now this is irrespective of the building department or the health department. This is simply Development Services efforts to try to make things not seem like we're sending you down 100 different steps to get to an end result. If you show all those things on your first one, you get the single fee. If you wait 6 months to come back and show something, I decided to build a different building, we haven't discussed any change of fees for that. That would be essentially or potentially a separate permit that's required. So a lot of properties have been rearranged in property boundaries. We're going to have to look at all those circumstances to make sure they comply with the state subdivision laws and the county subdivision laws. And the thing I want to mention is there's no single solution that can be made in one fell swoop for all the issues here. There are multiple issues that require some research and looking into. For example, the first slide said up to 40% of those lots don't meet minimum zoning standards. We're matching damaged properties to prior file approvals so we can see what was been done before, so we can see what needs to be done in the future. The effort is to try to get this done as quick as possible so people aren't delayed in their rebuilding, with the caveat that it's always good to step back and think about your rebuilding efforts and not do it in haste. I've had plenty of people say, I'm not rebuilding or I'm not going to rebuild. Well, it's a good idea to step back and think that through before you jump. I want to make it very clear that for rebuilding, the county has various subdivision-related fees applicable to new development. Rebuilding is not new development. They're not subject to any of the park fees or school fees or drainage fees or transportation fees if you're just getting back to where you were under the previous regulations. Next slide. This is just kind of a sample permit flow. Permits start generally at the regional building department. I told a guy today, bring me your site plan and I'll look at it first, because he couldn't meet the setbacks. I don't want him to start a process at regional and find out he's got an extra thing with us. We'll look at it ahead of time, hopefully, and try to steer him in the right direction at what we can approve. But they start at regional building. They come, as you know, all Black Forest is on well and septic, or essentially all Park Forest is water, but The destroyed properties are on well and septic, and that carries over with the health department. So there's a review box in the building permit process for health department to sign off. With accessory buildings, they typically won't require health department in that unless they have restrooms or connection to the septic system, and that typically is only between the regional building department and development services. Next slide. The health department, and they may speak to it, have a process in place for septic permits, and they are referred to development services for review to make sure it complies with any notes that were placed on the plat or any special restrictions. Agricultural buildings are a topic in themselves. There are a lot of agricultural buildings in Black Forest that really aren't agricultural, in part because there are just a lot of outbuildings in Black Forest. Not saying they are wrong. Some of them probably were built after requirements for agricultural permits, but the building code and the land development code work in concert on agricultural buildings. You don't need a building permit from a regional building for an agricultural building, and that's what I'm calling a stable or your barn that's used as a barn, and I'll show you a definition in a second. But if you're not an agricultural building, you're an accessory building, and you've got the regular accessory building process to follow. If you are an agricultural building, it starts with our department. We have a form that confirms that it's an agricultural use that meets that definition, and we review it for compliance with setbacks. I know many stables and barns in Black Forest don't meet the setback. We're going to fall back to that other provision the Board of Commissioners passed yesterday that says non-conforming can be put back to where they were. And there's a review by regional building simply on the floodplain portion of that. There may be some address review that also occurs. That kind of depends on what that building's used for. So next slide. Okay, I have it later. These are some of the questions we've been asked. My lot doesn't meet zoning. We've kept a list of those questions. We haven't had the opportunity to call people back. My lot doesn't meet zoning requirements. Well, there's existing provisions in the regulations to accommodate those. They can't accommodate them 100% if your well and septic are too close to themselves or to their neighbors. There are maybe some properties to be rebuilt that require variance. If they had a previous variance, that's going to be that's already done and over with, and so we'll have to look at those. For example, being if you had a one-bedroom cabin on a holding tank and you now want to put a three-bedroom house on a septic system, that's going to require being looked at by Health Department and Development Services. Properties that don't meet the 25-foot setbacks, I believe I've addressed how the board has directed us to deal with those circumstances. We're looking at all those. We're trying to look at those ahead of time now. Next slide. Live in a mobile home. We've already addressed that by the board resolution. That will be allowed under a form that we have, and we can bundle those. Many of those forms we said we can bundle in a single process, site plan process. If you just start within a mobile home or modular home and intend to build a house, the zoning regulations allow one house per property. We convert what you started with, or we think we can convert what you started with to become a one-year permit while you're building your house. So we can have for a time period a mobile home and a house under construction. If you want to live in an RV, there's really no way to track people living in RVs or campers, and it's going to happen. So we created a simple form. We haven't figured out if we're going to contact the people that have a demolition permit and ask them, or send them a copy and ask them to fill it out. It's a no-fee form and is only for the purposes of the county tracking those RVs. So we can update to the board how many of those RVs properties have been converted now to be houses for reconstruction. There are some, and I won't step over to the building permit side, but there are some issues that people will face as we get into winter. It's maybe not hard to get the electrical permit to connect the electricity in an RV, but it starts to get more challenging on gas, LP versus natural gas, and especially relative to your septic system and your well. Next slide. Again, we're going to allow people to construct the accessory building first. that solves a certain number of problems for staging. People have asked or said, I'm going to build the accessory building and live in it while I build my house or decide what to do. That crosses over into the building department substantially. I don't want to go into details about it because I don't know them. But if that circumstance occurs in the accessory building, it meets the building code and has living quarters in it, there are provisions in the regulations that for conversion of that to a guest house when you build your house. And the guest house provisions say that just can't be converted to be a rental apartment, but it can be maintained as a guest house. And so we think we have provisions in place already to accommodate that. Next slide. Multiple accessory buildings. Yes, they can be rebuilt into a single one because the board suspended the size limit of that single one and said it doesn't have to have the house there first. Stables are an accessory building. They can be rebuilt same location where they were before. We do have stable standards in the code, and it's an agricultural building permit. If you're build an agricultural structure to store all my stuff in, well, stuff is not agricultural use. RVs are not agricultural use. Those are accessory buildings that fall under the joint jurisdiction of the building department and the development services department. Next slide. I keep hitting that word agricultural. It's just because we know people put up metal buildings, call them agricultural, and then use them for other purposes. This is the definition that's in our regulations, and it essentially matches the state statute. And an ag building has a lot of special privileges in the county, especially in agricultural or rural areas. And it's an abused privilege frequently. So this is what we'll ask people when they're wanting to rebuild. Is it an ag building, and does it meet this definition? And if yes, then a building permit from the building department is not required, but a site plan approval by the county is required, which also can be a part of your main site plan for your rebuilding of the house. Next slide. Demolition, and there may be a separate handout or slide we can pull up of demolition. We spoke specifically last Friday night about demolition. There's been a lot of questions about it. The last thing I think the residents of the Black Forest want, or the county wants, is everybody to bury their destroyed structure on the property in a hole. That's a lot of little potential problem sites for the future and affects your land, affects neighbors' lands, etc. So the Regional Building Department has a demolition permit processes in place. There are standards on the Solid Waste Department about how to handle that building demolition debris. It is possible to bury it on your own property. It's just a really bad idea, and it'll be expensive to try to figure out because the state health requires that you have a whole number of reports that have been reviewed and approved by both the state and county before you do it. Regarding disposal of trees on site, I think there's a lot of programs trying to work for recovery of trees or reuse of trees, but technically you probably can bury your trees on site. You just don't want to bury them right next to your neighbor so his property collapses, and you know trees as they decompose, the land will sink, etc. So you need to cover it and have positive drainage. Foundations are a different discussion. As foundations with basements technically can be buried in place. You have to have positive drainage and have covered with 2 feet of fill, etc. If you want to reuse the slab that you had for your garage for some other purpose, you can certainly leave it right there in place and use it for that other purpose. If you're going to dig it up and rebury it on the property, then you have to do certain things: cover with 2 feet of dirt, be 5 feet above groundwater, provide positive drainage, revegetate, and there's a recommendation that you tell the guy that's buying your property that it's there, because you probably have a legal obligation to let him know in the first place. So we're recommending that end up occurring. The other, for the burned out houses, the state health department requires you place an environmental covenant on your property that absolutely discloses to someone that it's there. I would ask people to really think about, do you want to do that to your neighbors? Do you want to do that to yourself? Do you want to hurt your property from future sale? Because you probably have to disclose it. There's a lot of bad things that potentially happen with burial of the houses. So on a separate slide I have actually, and I could go over the Board of Commissioners resolution from yesterday. I'm not sure it's necessary. I've highlighted it here in my short discussion. The committee have any questions?
Excuse me, before we get into the discussion or questions there, let's cover a couple more things, and then we'll take questions on everything. A few notes that I, excuse me, a few notes I took. Pre-76 mobile homes were not discriminated against affordable housing. That is a life and safety issue. There's a reason why 76 is a magic date there. When you rebuild, when folks in Black Forest rebuild, kind of the thinking is we want you to conform if possible. Mark gave the example of 21 feet from a lot line where 25 is what is in the land development code. If we could get that other 4 feet with your new home, we'd like to have it. Sounds like in that case that will not be possible because of the septic system on the other side of the property, and we certainly don't want to be encroaching on septic systems and increasing people's costs there. So when we make those judgment calls on a case-by-case basis, we'll be leaning towards the homeowner. This is one time that the bias is towards you. Sounds like there's a lot of regulations. If you build an ag building, no permit, but oh, by the way, you've got to do a site plan. Well, those are really put in place to protect your neighbor or to protect you from your neighbor. There are two sides to every fence. So that's why a lot of our land development code is there, is to protect the neighborhood, protect the value of your property, protect the value of your neighbor's property. The health department, you heard a fair bit about septics and health department, and it is the El Paso County Health Department, and despite the name, they are not a division of county government. We have a great working relationship. We've got folks here today, and they've been out there with us every single day. But they are a arm of the state, just as the county is. They have their own separate board. So don't come into development services and expect to get health department questions answered. Just kind of one of those details that most people don't realize until they have reason to need it. And as far as reusing the slab, let me use that as kind of a lead-in to get a short presentation by Regional Building, which also is a separate department. I don't know how many years ago we were put together, but all the jurisdictions said, well, it's ridiculous for a contractor to have a license in Manitou Springs and a separate license in El Paso County and a separate license in Green Mountain Falls. And oh, by the way, there's Colorado Springs where most of them were doing their work. So they came up with the regional concept and created a separate entity. And as far as reusing your slab, that would be fine with the county from the land development side. But from the structural side, which is what Regional Building deals with, they may tell you, we want an engineer certification that the fire didn't destroy the concrete. We don't want you building a house and then having it crumble because it was built on a bad foundation. So Bob, if you've got a few minutes, and it looked like perhaps they had actually had a slide up there that you had, where information is available. Bob Croft from Regional Building.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just take a few moments. Could we pull up that other website, please? If you go to our main website, which is pprbd.org, you'll see that there's actually a link there that talks about the Black Forest Burn Area. Again, we call it Black Forest Burn Area rather than Black Forest because not all Black Forest burn. But we have a series of documents that you can click on, and it isn't just the document that tells what it is and gives you the information that you need, but it also then gives other links. So let's just, as an example, start off on our satellite office, if we may. So this is an important one. We want to let you know, and for those of you who weren't here Friday night, the first thing that our building official, Henry Ankowski, did was to take a building inspector and assign him to the Black Forest burn area as the recovery specialist. Chris has a special phone number. As you can see down in the lower left-hand corner, you can call, make an appointment with him. We usually don't have names of the department on the side of trucks, but we're going to do that especially for Chris. And so if you have a question at any time, give him a call. He'll make an appointment. The main thing for Chris to do out there is to act as I likened in olden times when policemen lived in a certain area. They kind of had their own beat that they walked on, and they made sure everything was going right. Chris is going to do that as much as he can over the burn area. But the other thing that's going to be important about it is Chris is empowered so that when you are rebuilding or you're doing any kind of scope of work, that he's there immediately, he can make him a decision, and that decision is binding. So you don't have to come back down to regional building department, talk to other people or whatever, but Chris is going to make those decisions. So the website is actually filled with many of that information. If you could go back to that list, I want to show you a new thing that we put on because it was brought up at the meeting on Friday night. Two things. Number one was a sense of inconsistency of what people were being told as far as permit goes or procedures or whatever. So Monday morning, we sat down, the 7 heads of the 7 different divisions of regional building, all those supervisors. We went over the documents. We made sure as much as humanly possible that we're not giving conflicting information. When you call, people are going to refer you to the website, or they're going to go use the website themselves. And so we hope to, eliminate the perception of inconsistency. But the other thing we did, if you could scroll down just a moment or two, please. Just a bar. Okay, under permits, guidance for permits. You can see there's all sorts of topics there, but what we did is kind of made an index. So if you click on guidance for permits, this is just brand new that was energized this morning. So the first thing it does is it gives you the guidelines for permits, tells you the building department number, tells you that licenses are required for anybody who's doing work, and this is very important. We have, and I'll show this at the end, about license requirements. However, there's also a provision there that's an exception that you can see about people who own their property and they want to do the work themselves. They may do it, and so we're allowing homeowner permits, and that's what they're called, to be purchased, and people can do that. I just want to warn you a couple of things, that if you pull a homeowner's permit, that makes you responsible for code compliance, and so you also need to be careful, in my opinion, and there might be attorneys that have a different opinion about who you allow on your job site and work for you, and compensation or whatever the cases may be. But again, homeowners can do the work themselves. And so scroll down again, please. Okay, so then if you click here, the first one, blue. No, to the right, you were there first. Okay. What it does is it brings up the requirements that have been adopted by El Paso County that talk about permits are required. And that's the first statement. And then it says work exempt from permits. And if you scroll down, there's 22 exemptions there. And so if you are building any of those structures that are exempted from permits, then don't worry about permits. You don't need them and so forth. And number 21 and 22 go back to, again, what Mark was talking about, agricultural buildings. And I think we have lower down on that, if you could, where the asterisk is, that we got something from their land development code. And Mark, if this isn't right, then let me know, and we'll get a different link there. But I think you and I coordinated on this. But it talks about accessory use structures and A35 and so forth. So hopefully, if you could go back to the permit guidelines again, please. What we tried to do is put some semblance of order that people might be wanting to get permits. So the first thing we started off is do you want to get your electrical or your gas reconnected to either your structure or your outbuilding or whatever? So there's that information. Again, you can click on that. Then demolition permits. Demolition permits are limited to dwellings only, not outbuildings. There's also a link there that talks about what the health department's going to expect when fire and demolition debris is removed, and the wetting and so forth, and whether you're required to have a demolition permit or not. You still need to follow the standards. Yes, sir?
Click on that demolition permit.
Okay, would you please click on the demolition permit? Third one down. Okay, so this talks about the demolition permit, and talks about that if you are doing it on a house, that's kind of considered now a construction site. What we're concerned about is that on a house, if you have a basement or cellar or any kind of subterranean area there, that part of the permit is that you get a temporary fence, fall protection around it, so that you're safe in the OSHA. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, please. It goes into no demolition or fire debris permit will be required for any accessory use structure. So we talked about that. It's only for the dwellings. And then it says whether a permit is required or not, the removal process should be complying with El Paso County Health Department rules and regulations. And then there's their major document on the left, and then on the right is kind of a, if I may use the term, Tom, no offense, a Reader's Digest version. It's much shorter, 2 pages as opposed to 11 or 12. But it talks about what's required by the health department to remove that fire debris. Yes, I had a question here.
Does that include small metal debris? I see a lot of people hauling stuff around the trailers.
Okay, Tom, do you want to answer it right now? Sure. All right.
Tom's going to come up in just a minute. Let's hold that.
Okay. Yes, sir?
I have a comment. Probably one of the most frustrating things that we see up in the Black Forest, and we live up there, and we're the stakeholders in this thing, is, and it may be clarified right now, I'm not sure, but I keep getting inputs from homeowners and from the Samaritan's Purse and the El Paso, or the Southern Baptist people about what do they have to do to get this thing done. They get run up against, well, you got to have this permit, and you got to have that permit, and it's going to cost you this and this and this. You know, you need to set that record straight of exactly what these people are required to have, and facilitate and streamline that process so they can go around and get on with cleaning up their property. They want to do it. The Baptist Convention is here. Samaritan's Purse is here. They have the ability and capability of removing the debris, and they sit. At least the perception they get is, well, I got to do this in regional building, I got to do that in regional building, and I can't get there from here. So you need to work that.
Okay.
Part.
Well, if I may continue with this document,
Okay.
and if I could invite you that when you have maybe more time, if you review the document and you have suggestions, I'll give you a card, and please let me know if you feel there needs to be clarity made. So anyway.
Well, these I won't belabor the point.
Sure.
But these organizations like Samaritan's Purse and the Southern Baptist thing are here to help.
I understand.
And they face roadblocks along the way.
And
we need to streamline that.
And I agree, and I also want to say that regional building is here to help too. So if I can just make a short answer. I know up in Waldo Canyon that Samaritan's Purse did a lot of what we call sifting. And all they were doing was going through the ash and debris trying to find the whatever things survived the fire, and they left the ash in the permit. There's no permit required for that. You can go ahead and do all that sifting. I think what we're concerned about, and Tom will answer the question, is when you start removing the ash and the debris and you're going to take it to a dump. So if we could scroll down just a little bit more, please. There's The wrecking permits, it talks about that. It also talks about if you have the same contractor who's doing the debris removal and he wants to upgrade to a wrecking permit, he can do so. There's documentation that's required. Continue on down if you would, please. To get a wrecking permit, we need to make sure we have disconnection of utilities, which is gas and electricity. And so we'll take either an email or some sort of written document. If you're not on Black Hill Energy's gas system, but you're on a propane system, then your supplier can provide that note to us that those systems have been disconnected and we're all right on that. And scroll down just a little bit more, please. And then we also have a note here, since the outbuildings do not require debris or wrecking permit, we encourage the homeowners to make sure that they go to the assessor and start talking about what outbuildings they had in, because we might not have records of it. They might be an agricultural building. We did not begin serving the county until 1966, so we do not have any records prior to 1966. So again, it's just a suggestion there. So if you could go back again to guidelines. Okay, so then we go down to temporary utility permits. For temporary living permits, you don't need to click. I'm just going to kind of go down this and highlight them. As Mark talked about, RVs are going to be allowed to be used, and fifth wheelers or whatever you want to call them, campers and so forth. You don't need a permit from regional building as long as they're on wheels. But obviously, if you're going to have an electric pedestal and you want to plug into that, or you want to have gas feeding it, whether it be propane or whether it be the Black Hills, we'll need to get some permits and inspections on that. If you wish to bring what I'm going to call a modular unit controlled by the state, some people call them manufactured housing, HUD housing, whatever. As long as it remains on wheels, you don't need a permit from regional building other than the temporary connections for the utilities. If you decide that that's what you want to set up as your permanent residence, then there's a document there that talks about that you can go ahead and get a permit to use that manufactured unit. And there's two types of foundations. There's a permanent foundation that you would dig in the ground. The other one would be more of what we call a temporary foundation. It consists of a series of blocks and wood with tie downs to hold it down, but all that's outlined on it. Scroll down, please. Then there it is for modular permits. For rebuild of the previous dwelling unit, again, I want to just clarify that. There's three options there, and we're trying to expedite as much as we can. If you have a house and we have plans in our database, and we have over 2 million images, but if you have the plans and you want to rebuild that exact house, we will allow you to build that same exact house. Now, one of two things can happen. Number one is you're going to build it on the existing foundation. As Commissioner Heisey said, is if you're going to use the same foundation, you need to get a structural engineer out there to tell us that the foundation is not damaged and is adequate to support the new house. A lot of funny things can happen with the foundations as they get hot. As you know, there's steel in the foundation. So even though the concrete isn't burned, the steel could be hot enough that it gets fatigued. Certainly the anchor bolts that come up could be loose or whatever. But if we get a letter from the engineer, then you can come down. And by the way, on our website, our main website, you can enter in any address and access any plan that you want to that we have. So you could check that out. Get that plan, come down, and I can tell you in a walkthrough process, which is signing in at the kiosk. You can meet with plans examiner, and hopefully in the regional building department, you can walk out within 15 and 20 minutes for our approval as far as rebuilding that house. Now, for scenario number two, you want to do the same thing, only your foundation isn't good. Then you need to get us a new foundation plan, and then you can build that house again. And then number three is if you want to build something new that's never been there before. So it can either be a master plan from a builder that's existing, or a custom home, a dream home that you always wanted all your life. And those two plans, the master plan with a site plan is very, very quick. Again, a matter of hours, and you should be able to get out the door. We're going to expedite any other plan that comes in that might be site-specific, as we call our custom homes. Then there's a website there for newer accessory use building permits that talks about outbuildings such as garages or barns or whatever is not agricultural buildings. Remember, anything that's declared by county zoning as an agricultural building is not required a permit. And then if you're just going to repair, whether it's an existing dwelling or an accessory use, you can click there, and basically we just need to see plans on how you plan to reconstruct, or not reconstruct, but repair that. So continuing down, if you would please. Just to let you know, some fees are based on cost per square foot, and some fees are based on the valuation table, and some fees are just flat fees. So for instance, a flat fee would be a re-roof permit. So it's a cosmetic, you need to re-roof your house, it's a flat rate, you can get it, or you need to re-side, that's a flat rate and get it. Other ones, like for instance, if you have, let's say some burned trusses or whatever on your house, you just tell us the cost of the job's gonna be X number of dollars, and then we figure it off that fee, and then if you're gonna build a brand new house. There were two questions. Could I have yours first, please? Yes?
Fire trucks have been in there, the electric company has been pulling in and out of there, riding right over the top of my lease line. I know the permit for lease line is like $500. Are they gonna adjust some of the prices on the permit prices so we can get some of this done a little bit cheaper?
Could I ask Tom to address that, since the leach field and the approval comes from the health department, please? Yes, sir, you had a question?
Do these permits you're describing for fire damage, repair, debris hauling, do they also apply to the people who suffered damages from the flood in Manitou, which is a consequence of the fire in Waldo Canyon?
I believe that we're going to follow the same process for everybody. The documents that we have here mirror very much what Waldo Canyon or the Mountain Shadows do, except they're more extensive, and the reason is we just have many more players. Instead of having Colorado Springs and different divisions within Colorado Springs, such as zoning and fire and so forth, we're dealing with two utility companies. We're dealing with Black Forest Fire instead of the Colorado Springs Fire Department and so forth. So I don't see any reason why we would not allow the same thing. Now, I just wanted to, since you brought it up, we went out, our assessment team went out yesterday to Manitou, and we evaluated 9 houses. 4 of them we put that, in our opinion, it was not safe to enter because the structural damage was so bad. 2 of them, we said it was okay to enter, but suggested you really not live there, and the other ones we said were cosmetic. Now, the next step on something like that is to get, and you can do the same thing for a partially burned down accessory building, is to get a design professional, licensed architect or engineer. And then they can come in and they can tell you whether it can be repaired or not repaired. My personal opinion is that I'm not sure whether any of the damage up in Manitou Springs would require all the houses to come down. But that's going to be a value engineering valuation between the engineer, the homeowner, and the insurance company. Because it could be just like, for instance, your car. Sometimes it's in a wreck and they just say, hey, it's totaled, even though you don't think it is, and then they pay you so much money and that's it. But other times they say, no, we're going to go ahead and pay for the repairs. But what we did yesterday was just truly an evaluation for the safety of the occupants or potential occupants on that. So, thank you. Okay, I'll wrap it up. And so anyway, there's the fee calculator. It also talks about usually the minimum permit fee is $50. We're offering for those people who have been affected a zero cost, first-time consultation on utility releases. And we've also lowered the cost of demolition and wrecking permits from the normal $50 down to $30. So I encourage you, again, to take a look at the website. If you have questions, give us a call. There's a link right there to the website, and you can go there. So thank you, and I'm sorry if I ran over. I just wanted to make sure people knew this information was there. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, appreciate that. Tom Gonzalez from Health Department, few quick comments, then we'll get to your questions, and I'll take your question, and we'll refer it to the appropriate agency.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tom Gonzalez, I work for El Paso County Public Health. I'm the Environmental Health Division Director. What is environmental health, real quick? What our goal is to protect human health from air, water, and food. We also do body art as well, but our goal here is the primary core functions is air, water, and food, basic. So what we do is our major mission when we're up in there is protecting air quality and protecting groundwater, drinking water originating from the ground. Those are very important core public health things. I'm telling you, I'm in contact with my folks and friends in Larimer County who had the Hyde Park fire. We're learning a lot from them. I know them because I worked there for 11 years, so I know those folks, and they're giving me lots of good feedback, what they've learned, what went wrong, what went right, so we're in concert with Larimer County. When I talk about septic systems, we're going to be creative problem solvers, as always my staff are, but our number one mission is to protect that groundwater. We need that wastewater to be treated, and we want it to be working functionally, so we need these systems evaluated. We're working on that process, we're streamlining it, but the major goal here is when you rebuild, we don't want 6 months later, all of a sudden you're well contaminated or your neighbor's well contaminated. Now we've created an event within an event, so we don't want that, so we're going to work on that. When we're talking about the ash and debris, folks, what I want is to protect you guys, your human health, the neighbor's health. That ash can have what we call non-inert stuff in there. It can react, it can get in your lungs and cause long-term damage. I don't want that. So that's why we've got some things in place on wetting the product, wearing your N95 masks, covering your skin up, those basic things, because we don't want you guys getting ill down the road from this. So we've learned a lot from Waldo, we've learned a lot from Larimer, we've learned a lot from Texas and California, all this information. The state's waived all their fees around asbestos. We know there's asbestos in there. We don't want you breathing asbestos. So these basic precautions will minimize that considerably and protect your health. Lastly, when it gets to debris, the way the state looks at it is inert and non-inert. Inert's a fancy word saying it's not going to leach through the soil into groundwater, and it's not going to react to cause human health. Concrete foundations are an example. Metal that's been washed off is another example. When Waldo, all the metal was recycled for most part. The concrete could be buried on site. It's the non-inert stuff we're worried about. That's the stuff in the ash. Think about a home. You've got TVs, you have batteries, you've got kids' toys, you've got all this stuff in there that burnt. It burnt at a high enough heat that most of that went out in the atmosphere. But there's still some stuff left, like heavy metals such as mercury, asbestos, which is a friable fiber. That's what we call non-inert. That's the stuff we want to get out safely to a landfill. We'll problem solve with you. I got staff up there looking at wells right now. We'll do whatever to get this going, because I've heard that concern over here by the gentleman. I work very closely with these two gentlemen. Matter of fact, I see a lot of them. So we'll work together as a team. As my boss said, we're trying to get one of our registered environmental health specialists positioned up there where he or she can make decisions right on site and be able to help you guys right there, not have to travel around or try to get bounced around. So that's our mission and our goal as we move forward. The gentleman brought up fees. We're having that dialogue right now with my public health director and our Board of Health. And we do have different levels of repairs. We have a minor and major, and something that's a lesser fee for a minor. We're looking into that. So that's a great question.
Okay, so that concludes my presentation on the Land Use, et cetera, Committee. But I would like to talk to anyone after the meeting that would like to work with me a little more in depth on the issues that you've already heard about, that you think may be coming up, or you just have an interest in helping your neighbors. Be sure and get with me after the meeting. Thanks.
And we'll get through the rest of the agenda real quick so that we can have public comment, but want to get an update from the Black Forest Foundation.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. we appreciate the efforts that the county has made in terms of streamlining land development code to accommodate the people in there. As I stated earlier, though, we're still conflicted on regional building and the kind of fee structures, and I think we need to have a separate meeting, as you suggested, to talk about that, and bundling fees, much as you've done in the land development code to take care of that problem. Utility restoration is going very good. The last time we talked a little bit about CenturyLink. They have leaned forward in the traces. They put up electronic signs throughout the area, and I think most of, if not all, the internet service and phone service is put back into that area where there aren't people living. The location of regional building specialists, you mentioned that they were going to be still in the area. That's good to get personal contact instead of driving down to the government building in the center of Colorado Springs. That's really about all we have. We meet once a week. We're meeting tonight to discuss. I tried to do it last night and couldn't do it. We're going to meet tonight, and we'll bring any issues forward that pertain to what the county can do as a whole. We're reaching out to the people. We found that the ecumenical approach that we have taken in terms of getting all the local churches together, they have really identified most, I can't say most, but a good number of people that have been impacted by this thing in terms of the total loss of their home. And they networking together, and we're able to go out and touch the individual. And that's the key to this whole thing, is be able to communicate directly with the individual. Right now, we don't have an identity to each one of those persons like we would like to have. And so we're working on that. And we're flushing out the contact names with the list we have in terms of property residents and stuff like that.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a member from staff to talk about our Disaster Assistance Center real quick? Okay, excellent.
My name is Travis Hyde, and I work with the Department of Human Services, and I am one of the supervisors for the Disaster Assistance Center. I want to make a real quick correction on numbers. We currently have seen a total of 1,800 families at the Disaster Assistance Center. I didn't want to have wrong numbers going out. Also, today is our last day at the Disaster Assistance Center at 12201 Cross Peak View. So if you haven't come out and you need to still talk to the El Paso County Household and Hazardous Waste Forestry Service, or the regional build, nope, I'm sorry, Home Builders Association. They're also there on site still. Public Health is still there, so if you've not gotten your tetanus shots, come out. Black Hills Energy and Mountain View Electric are no longer on site, so if you need their assistance, you need to contact them directly. El Paso County Development Services, which is zoning, and the regional building department are no longer on the site, so you need to contact them separately as well. Again, we're there today from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We are right between New Life Church and Pikes Peak Community College. Some people are having a tough time finding us. We are right in the middle. Our phone banks are still open for the Disaster Assistance Center. You can still call, have your questions answered about any services that we had at the Disaster Assistance Center. That number is 444-8301. You can also go online to the El Paso County website, and you can submit an email to through the BFF Assistance website, and we're answering your questions as quick as we can. I also want to just take a minute to let everyone know that we had a total of 36 agencies that showed up at the Disaster Assistance Center in less than like 24 hours and made it extremely successful. And I do have a list that I've maintained of all of the agencies that have been with us from the start and or have gone back to their daily jobs that you can get from me. I did bring some copies with me. We will also have copies at the Citizen Service Center on Garden of the Gods Road at the front desk if you do come down that way. So that if you do still need to get in touch with anybody, Salvation Army, Goodwill, we have all that contact information for you.
Thank you. Our next item is subcommittees, the meetings that have already been scheduled. What we try to do is once we receive notification and we've coordinated a meeting date and time, we will send that out over the established network that we have via email. We'll also notify the press, make sure that they get that out there. Those are typically county sanctioned events. The ones that aren't, we will clearly label that this is just, we're providing a service and providing this information. So look out for the ones that are county sanctioned events. We'll clearly state that in the email notification. Other than that, we're going to move to other comments real quick. Probably in about, I'm looking at a few weeks out, we're going to have an evening meeting just devoted to lessons learned. That's part of Commissioner Littleton's subcommittee, but we really want to take time once dust settles a little bit, for no pun intended, but we want to be able to really analyze and start capturing what are those things that went right, what went wrong, and what are the things that we need to change, because we want to document this, have a very open and public process, and then follow up with it and make sure that we communicate this back to the community so that you can show that we've actually have listened to you and we're going to take ownership on the issues and the direction that we need to move forward. All of our meetings that we have here are going to be televised as far as they're available on YouTube. So if you feel like you miss a meeting, you can go to our county website. There's a link there and you can watch it in painful detail again if you want. But we want to make sure that we provide a service so that we want to make sure that if there are people out there that missed the meeting, they have access to this information because we do believe it's very important. So with that, I want to open it up to public comments, and it can be on any particular issue, and we'll...
Hi, I just had a thought while I was sitting here. You're offering well testing now, but once things settle down and starts coming down into the ground, how far out should we consider retesting?
That's a wonderful question, and what we're trying to do right now is survey and assess the damage, and then the next thing is to look at long-term possible testing. We're working with the Department of Natural Resources at the state. Those are the folks that license well drillers and approve wells. We're working closely with those. They're out in the field with my staff right now, which is a really unique collaboration, and it's going well. But we're going to look at, you've got to understand, we got the Denver Basin, I'm sure you know, so we have different confining aquifers as we move down, all the way to the Fox Hills, Laramie one. So we're going to have to kind of strategize on how we do that. We can maybe piggyback off some other studies, but we're going to look into that long-term testing to determine if there is, and we'll be working with USGS and some other folks that have those skill sets on testing and putting that together.
I think another caveat, certainly for those that have already taken us up on the free well testing, again, and this is completely not regulated by us, but a private well owner is always welcome to have their water test samples brought to the health department for testing. It is for bacterial testing, it's a $20 fee. For other type of testing, it goes up to about $40 when you're talking about other types of things we're looking for. But please know, our lab isn't there just strictly for community water supplies. So as individuals may want to just have their own peace of mind a year down the road, that service is certainly there and available. And we really try to keep the price down so people are encouraged to think about doing that. Because again, private well's not regulated by us, but we're certainly there if you want that tested. Does that make sense? But we're going to be doing things out in the field to be looking at how to do some assurance and protection related to the aquifers. But right now, we're really in a mode of what I would call triaging and getting us out there to help, because there are certainly damage. As those of you that were here Friday night, there's definitely well caps that are damaged out there, and the first step is to get those corrected.
Yes, I have a question. Domestic versus household wells, for us people who have horses and livestock and grow gardens and things, are they going to make us go to household well?
That is a water rights question, and I am not an expert on that, but we can certainly get that question to our folks at Department of Natural Resources. I'll write that down. I can get your information, but we'll ask that question. Sure. We'll ask that question to the experts.
I want to go ahead and jump in real quickly with a question. I have a question for all of you, but before I do that, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are having a meeting on July 8th, the evening of July 8th, and I hope there's someone here who can remind me. I think that's at the Woodman Valley Chapel out on Woodman. Is that right? Obviously, that'll go out through the communication network, but that's going to be a very important meeting with United policyholders. They were extremely helpful with Waldo. They have another angle regarding your insurance, and that'll just be a tremendous meeting for you to come to with insurance questions. So that's coming up the evening of July 8th, 6:30 to 8:30, and I do believe it's at the Woodman Valley Chapel, but okay, good. So a question on that?
And what days?
All these meetings are going to be on our elpasoco.com. That's our county website, so you'll see all of these meetings there, elpasoco.com. Not to mention the fact that we will push this out through the email distribution. Now, the question that I have to you, and I'd be remiss to forget to say thank you to Mountain Springs Church once again for hosting us and having staff here and helping us out with this. We are so grateful to them for that. My question to you is, there was a huge issue last week related to CenturyLink. We addressed that. They came in. We think that everything's been addressed. Any more issues related to CenturyLink that you'd like us to take back? Okay, we've got a CenturyLink issue over there, so I don't know if you want to keep, I don't want to kind of go out of turn, but I want to make sure we're covered on CenturyLink, so whoever's next.
Thank you. Good morning. We have a decades-long issue of communication infrastructure issues in Black Forest. More recently, it's the fiber optics network. For large-scale developments like on Woodman and Black Forest Road, those new subdivisions, they're putting in fiber to all the homes. For those of us newer subdivisions who are, say, 10, 15 years old or less, we get nothing but copper. We have limited internet connectivity. The lines are very weak. Rains drop our internet constantly. This is something that's been reported to CenturyLink for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to this. I think if we're going to be rebuilding our burn area infrastructure, we should at least address expanding the network. If they're going to be digging on the roads or widening the roads for safety, for whatever reason, we might as well have them take all the monies we've paid all these years in infrastructure and actually put some in for us.
Okay, we will definitely take that back to them, and that's not something that we can dictate to them, of course, but that's something that we can certainly take back to them and see if they'd be open to talking about that as the rebuilding takes place. In terms of getting you back up and running with your service, are we better now than we were last week? That's an important question.
I just have a cord running to my house.
Sir, we need to have you on the microphone.
Well, I'll make a quick comment. I have phone service, but it's like a orange code laid across the ground from about 300 yards from the street to my house. It's about like that. It's an orange. I mean, CenturyLink is yeah, wrong century. And I support his. I can't get any internet ever.
I had a question on the earlier statement on insurance that you're going to be giving, having meetings on that.
Are they going to be able to offer any, like, legal advice if you do have problems with your company?
The answer to that is whether or not we're having legal advice. It's no. You're going to need to go out and seek separate legal advice. I would not be comfortable allowing that to occur in this particular environment with a county-sanctioned event. But there are members of the El Paso County Bar Association that did volunteer in our Disaster Assistance Center that are more than willing to provide that sort of advice.
Can there be some sort of coordination with the building department, CenturyLink, the water department, everybody else, so they don't come through, dig up the roads, put in new gas lines, patch it all up? Then CenturyLink comes in, digs up all the roads, puts in their fiber optics. Then they patch it all up. Then the gas lines come in, dig up all the roads. Are they coordinating so it's all done at one shot as opposed to just for the next 3 or 4 years, we got roads being under construction again and again and again?
The short answer is yes. I'm very confident in our staff that we will, if activity like that occurs, that we're going to do our best to coordinate those.
Yeah, I was asking, maybe you've clarified this, but I'm not sure. I was told that those of us who have lost money are either underinsured or no insurance, that they needed to report that to the county so that they could come up with a certain figure to repent to FEMA and therefore get FEMA help. Is that true, or was that a rumor?
Well, and again, that falls into the area that we need to have a policy discussion on how we are going to gather that information. Clearly, FEMA needs some information from us so that we can determine whether as far as the disaster declaration. However, we're going to provide additional guidance about that in a future meeting. This is something that we are clearly going to have to address immediately at the board level. And so I don't want to have that discussion here at this level, but we will provide some guidance on that.
Question, is this time and location semi-permanent or until further notice?
No, I don't believe in having meetings just for the sake of having meetings. I want to work with our subcommittees and make sure if there's something that we need to report out or decide on, then we will have a steering committee meeting. Commissioner Lathan and I will get together and determine when the next full steering committee meeting is. But you got to understand, there's this meeting, but there are a lot of other subcommittee meetings that are more important that we want to have in the evening so people can really, that's where you roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, and we want to make sure we publicize those. But when we have this meeting, it's more of a report out to make sure everybody is on task, staying in their lane, and providing direction. So we'll let you know.
Okay, the only reason I ask is I didn't know about this until watching the news at 6 o'clock this morning. So
I'm happy they did that.
Yeah, I have a second question, probably on a state level. I know ASUSA, the insurance company. USA, yeah, right. You know what I'm talking about. They will not insure in Black Forest. And again, the Gazette published a story about State Farm is going to put in requirements. Are the residents of Black Forest going to have any protection by the state from the insurance companies coming in and say, well, we're just not going to insure anybody in Black Forest, or we're going to require you to remove so many trees that it's no longer a forest?
Again, we aren't going to be able to provide an answer to that question. That came up during our insurance meeting, and again, I want to keep it at the subcommittee level so that if you are having problems like that, please send us an email so that we can look into that. I don't want to issue any sort of guidance at this level without investigating whether or not that in fact is true. But if people are in the community are having concerns or getting feedback like that, please let us know so that we can take that up at the appropriate level.
My question is based on the trees that are burned. Thankful my house did not burn, but my neighbors did. And he's got 15 acres, and he's already purchased another home, so he's not rebuilding, he's not doing nothing. I'm just concerned that I'm going to live in a place that I still call home, but I still see burned trees. And also, what is the regulations, what are they supposed to do if they're abandoned? They're keeping their land, but they're not staying there. Are they gonna come in, give them a dateline, of when are they gonna cut those trees?
And Judy can jump in and help me with this along with our development services. But just in general, with trees, we've got a subcommittee that's going to provide some guidance with that. And I think the rule of thumb right now is we want to kind of wait and see, and maybe allow a year to go by to see whether or not some of these trees can be saved. With regard to some of the rules and regulations that we have technically relaxed, we still reserve the right to come in at any point in time when there's a health and safety issue impacting the community to take appropriate action.
I'm a manufactured housing dealer, and just had a question of clarification on what you guys are defining as the temporary housing, because you've used the term mobile, modular. Those are two different codes, and you have a year exception that I heard, but I'm not sure that the county understands the timing that it takes to get a mobile home onto a piece of land right now. Used homes are really hard to find. A new home takes 4 to 6 weeks after it's been ordered to get here, plus trying to find the mover and setter. So from our standpoint, it seems like it's a year is going to go by really quickly. So what are the implications, or what's going to be the process of getting that extended?
Mark Gebhardt, Development Services. Yes, there's difference between mobile, manufactured, modular. Some people may choose to have those stay on there permanently. The zoning allows them to be permanent, and so you need the permanent set associated with that if you are doing it permanently. There are provisions that the 1-year time period can be extended by the director of the department. The odd thing is the extension and the interaction between the building department and development services. Building department said if it's on wheels, it's not really subject to the permit. If they're going to be on there and not build a house to replace it, presumably they'll leave it on wheels and it'll be covered by that 1-year permit. I don't know, does that address the question?
Partially.
What?
Partially, because you can say a mobile home is a HUD code a mobile home is a HUD code with permanent rails underneath it. A modular home is flat and craned onto it. So my main question is, if somebody called me, because we're getting a lot of calls right now, if somebody called me, I need to be able to tell them, yeah, if it takes you a year and a half to build your house, whether that be a modular, if you're moving a mobile home onto land, are they going to allow that to just roll over if it takes 2 years or to build the house? What's the renewal process for?
The renewal process is an extension of the previous approval.
Okay, and that's not going to be a problem. They just go in and sign a document.
I would presume it'll be that. I mean, we're trying to predict out now, a year from now. If they're going to make that their permanent residence, then they definitely have to comply with the building code and make it on a permanent set, which the zoning code allows either of those scenarios.
Right, okay.
I'm with Colorado Industrial Recycling, and we are recycling a lot of the metal for the homeowners. And my question is regarding to the vehicles. I know you had mentioned that the Department of Revenue was working on that, because a lot of the containers that we're putting out, they're putting vehicles in, and the homeowners aren't sure what to do if they have a title or no title. Some have titles and some do not. So we are trying to help them with that. Who would I be able to contact at the Department of Revenue to get that information to them?
And I'm sorry, was a title to what now?
For the cars that they have lost?
Right, that's the question I mentioned earlier. We've already asked the Department of Revenue about that. They're having to study it in the departments, but we'll try to get an answer back to the committee as soon as we can about that.
I understand that our clerk and recorder, Wayne Williams, has been working on that, and I think you could probably contact him here locally, and he may be able to get you an answer pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to jump on that question about an extension. The action that the Board of County Commissioners took is contemplated for 1 year. We did ask our staff specifically to come back in 6 months with a report as to how many permits are being pulled, what they're seeing, whether we think we're trending on a good amount of time for people to be able to do these kinds of things. We're really not talking about an extension right now because we've just put this in place for a year. We want to see how that works. But as with any action of the board, if in a year's time or even prior to that, we see that this is not accommodating it well enough that we need to have more time, then the board will take that up and make a decision to extend or figure out another way to work with that. So I just want to say that we're not talking about extending that 1 year time frame right now. We just put that in place yesterday. We think that's a good amount of time to get us rolling and to really be able to assess. We'll be looking at that throughout that year to make sure we're on good track.
I have a question also about the building codes. Are they going to change to reflect, like, for putting sprinklers into houses? I know in Waldo County, and a lot of them were required to put sprinklers in. My insurance was for my house. The building department sent me my plans for my house. It didn't include sprinklers, didn't include a lot of the other upgrades. The house was built 37 years ago. My insurance is going to cover that part, but if the county is going to require me to do all these extra things, specifically putting sprinklers in the house, that's an added cost to all the homeowners and also a draw on our wells and everything else.
Well, let me tell, there's two issues there. There are two issues there. We are going to have a lessons learned process. I mean, during the active fire period, the number one question from media is, are you going to be changing any codes or anything like that? And we've cautioned people to take a deep breath because first we need to find out whether or not the codes that are in place right now work and whether or not we need to make any changes. So we're going to have a very public process. That's going to be part of our lessons learned activity to determine what's right, what's wrong, and what needs to change. So all those types of proposed changes that we're going to put on hold. With regard to the sprinkler requirements, there's already rules and regulations that are in place, and we aren't deviating from that. That's a topic that we could stretch this meeting out for another hour to discuss, but we will, we're going to work with the appropriate agencies to provide some clarifications in that area.
I'm gonna jump on that one because it's a hot topic for me. A very hot topic for me. So I'm just speaking as one commissioner. Any kind of a change like that, you'd be talking about changes that would need to be made to the International Fire Code or the International Residential Code. That's a fire issue. We are working with fire. We've been kind of dealing with this issue for quite some time, actually, because there are certain requirements that fire come through the Board of County Commissioners to make some of those changes. I will tell you, I will not support adding sprinkler requirements to residential building. And I hope that that will be something that we'll be able to, we'll be doing as a full board and be able to work with. But that's a big issue. We're very aware of it. We're working with fire, and you'll very likely see some meetings coming up where we'll be discussing that very thing. That is not something that I'm going to support at all.
Yeah, I'm on the Black Forest Board of Directors. I'm the chair of the board. And our fellows, as the regional building said, that the plans will have to go through the fire departments for the particular districts we're in. And we're going to follow a common sense approach to the fire code. And we're going to probably look at a fire flow analysis on each individual structure. But right now, the way it stands is we're not going to mandate sprinklers, but if it's, and we have a lot of work to do on this. I think we've got a set of code that we have brought forward to you. We'll have to take a look at that in light of this fire. But we need to also protect the structure and the adjoining structures on there. And if it's a huge house, and most of these homes are not, they're probably not going to require a sprinkler in the smaller home. There's other ways to mitigate fires. Cisterns, partitions in the home that separates a garage from the thing. And anyway, a fire flow analysis looks at the whole structure and the surrounding areas, and in terms of the terrain and availability of water and a partridge in a pear tree, and we'll come up with a common sense solution.
Hi, my name's Stacy Poore. I'm with Care and Share Food Bank for Southern Colorado, and I don't have a question. I just have some information that I'd like to share with you, and hopefully you can share also with other folks in your neighborhoods. On July 20th and July 27th, from 10 to 2, at the Pikes Peak Community College out here, Rampart Range. We're doing what we call a free farmers market. It's for everyone who's been affected by the fire. If you were temporarily evacuated, a business in the area perhaps, you've lost your home, lost work, first responders and firefighters, we ask that you come out between 10 and 2 o'clock. We have non-perishable food to share with you that your community has donated for you. We've also purchased or will purchase lots of fresh fruits, vegetables, meat, milk, cheese, dairy, things like that. It's very simple. You pull up. We have a crew of volunteers who give you lots of love and lots of yummy food, and hopefully you drive away with things that can fill your cabinets. So that's on July 20th and July 27th. Everybody can come to both of them. We did this last week at the Rampart Range campus. Saw about 350 families, so we hope we see that many or more on these next 2 distributions. So please come both times and receive what your community has donated for your benefit. It is. It's at Pikes Peak Community College, the Rampart Range campus.
Real quick, there's been several touches on about getting rid of your scrap metals. Would it be possible for the county to put up, for let's say the next 12 months, some dumpsters at a location like Section 16 land where we can all bring our scrap metals and then they could be hauled to the various centers?
I don't know if Kathy wants to. We're working on that. I hope to have an answer for you on that by next week.
Thank you.
Got a question. I need longer arms these days. Are you going to have anyone from the Pikes Peak Association of Realtors address or attend any of the meetings? That's a great idea. I heard that all transactions were to hold at one time, of course, during and immediately after the fire. What's the status now? Fantastic question. We hadn't thought about that. We hadn't included them. That is now a piece of homework, and we will get that done. Okay. I'll get contact information and get back directly to you.
I just wanted to point out, as a lesson learned in Waldo, that scrap metal, a private homeowner could actually sell that. So definitely keep that in mind. I just like to point that out. So before you just maybe put it in a dumpster, think about that. You might have some resources. Yeah, and especially the older homes that may have copper and things like that. I just want to point that out because people did do that during Waldo.
I just wanted to let you know I'm with Colorado Industrial Recycling, and as a business, we are doing it for free for the homeowners. We're placing the containers. You just have to call us, and we will set a container out for you. And all the money goes back to the homeowners. So just so you know. So my number is 491-2200, and my name is Carla. Carla. 491-2200. And please be aware that, like she said, there's value to it, and we are paying you for it, and we are paying you a better price than if you drove it in yourself. We are putting the containers out to make it safer transport from your property instead of having people pack their vehicles and drive it in. Carla. Colorado Industrial Recycling.
Any last minute questions before we adjourn? Nope.
As far as replacing car titles and land titles, where do we go for that?
We think it's the clerk and recorder. Dennis, yep, I'm getting a thumbs up. Car titles would be the same. Yep, Clerk and Recorder's Office, there's one up, I'm not going to get the addresses. 1675 West Garden of the Gods. What's the North Union Town Center? Yeah, Research and Union, wish I had that in my head. Any one of the Clerk and Recorder's offices, sir.
No, this is Judy Von Olafeld. I just wanted to mention something kind of near and dear to my heart here. The county evidently is okay with burying burned trees on properties, but I think it needs to be with a caveat that burned trees should be buried in burned treat areas, not in the wetlands, in the meadows or the meadow shoulders. There can be a huge amount of environmental damage, disruption of the drainages, the subterranean drainages, and so on, if they're buried in openings, which might seem really logical and easy to somebody operating a backhoe, but that's not where they should be put. And I think the county needs to issue some guidelines about that.
Any last questions? Okay, I want to make sure that we definitely thank Mountain Springs Church for providing this facility to be able to do that. And we've also had Samaritan's Purse and the Baptist Church back there. We've got a representative here. We want to thank you very much for helping out. Again, we're coming up on the 4th of July, and I keep emphasizing throughout this whole thing that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I understand that, we've been going at it for quite a while. I know the staff has, I feel for the members of the community, but try to take some time and enjoy at least whether it's an hour or the entire weekend. Take some time and kind of dial down and just relax. Come back refreshed, ready to go. And we'll provide some more guidance with regard to when our next meeting is, but try to have a good holiday. So thank you very much for attending.
Settle